Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Lyle today. Lyle's an individual that reached out to me after hearing one of my Molalla area episodes from Oregon. And he said, I've got some things to share about the Molalla, Colton, Estacada area. And so I've been waiting to talk to Lyle for quite a while, but no rhyming intended, I guess. But Lyle, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
All right. Great. How are you?
Oh, having a good day. We're kind of going through some snow, but I think you guys are out there too, at least a little further south in the Willamette. But
yeah, no, we just recently had a snowstorm where it's still on the ground as we speak.
Same here. Lyle, I think from what you were saying, we got a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to go ahead and, hand things right over to you. Feel free to take us back as far as we need to go to when this experiences started happening for you. And you're welcome to go right ahead.
All right. Thank you. So I'm going to start out with back when the first encounter happened and kind of leading up to that. I was grown up in Central Oregon, Tumalo to be exact. Went to Redmond High School. I had a handful of buddies that we did nothing but hunt and fish. Growing up, that's all I ever did was hunt and fish. And we always liked to go in these spots that was super hard to get to. We discovered early on in our little hunting career that the farther away you got from people, that's where the bigger animals like to hang out. Bucks, bulls, when I say buck, deer and elk. This was over, we'd been hunting deer for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years together. And we discovered an area, this is back in, I'd say the late 80s. I was like 16 years old. And we discovered an area on the maps. We didn't have digital, this Onyx stuff and GPSs and all that. Of course, we were young. We couldn't afford a lot of that fancier stuff anyways. We discovered a spot on the map. It was just south of Sisters, and it was the Three Creeks Wilderness area. There's a Three Creeks campground, and I think it's a Three Creeks reservoir or lake. There was one road that, back then, there was one road that, and it was the only road that went out into the middle of this wilderness area. It went about 2 miles out in, which I say the middle, there was still a lot of wilderness out beyond that. So we decided we were going to go up and scout it just before hunting season. So it was me and 2 other buddies. I did not talk to them before this, so I'm going to try not to say their names because I don't know if they'd want me to talk about them on this. But we went up and we decided we were going to scout this area, see if it was someplace we'd want to hunt. Well, this road went out into this wilderness area, like I was saying, and at the very end of it, it dead ended, and then it was more or less like a cul-de-sac, I guess. That's probably the best way to explain it. It was just a big round area where the road ended, and it was cleared out. It was flat. And this place was super thick with jack pines. It was jack pine thicket all the way around this area. So we got out And just to make things a little simpler, I'm going to just say uh, the three of us, we decided we're going to split up. And I told one of my buddies, said, well, will you go directly north from here and scout? My other buddy, I said, you go south and I'm going to go straight east. So west would have been the exit out of there. So we all split up, and I had walked maybe only 150 yards into this jack pine thicket, and I heard the distinct sound of a deer bounding. And I was stopped for a minute, and I was listening, and it sounded like it was getting closer and closer to me. So I kind of hurried up and got into a spot where I could see because it was so thick. And here come this doe running right at me. Her tongue was hanging out. You could tell she'd been running, something had been running her, and basically almost ran me over. She could care less that I was even there. I was like thinking in my head, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Well, that's a good sign. We're seeing deer. And so I think I walked maybe another 100, maybe even 150 yards, and I started hearing this talking. And I was like, what the heck? How did those two, thinking my two buddies, was out in front of me talking? And which made sense to me that it was them because, okay, they spooked the deer. And that's what had that deer coming towards me. Well, as I got a little bit closer, I could tell that they were talking pretty loud, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I was like, them ding dongs, what the heck are they doing? They're scaring everything away. We're out here to scout deer, not scare them away. And so I continued walking closer and closer to them. And as I got closer, I could tell, I was like, this is not a normal talk. It's like, it sounded like Chinese, like a foreign language. And there was two distinct, smaller sounding, like almost sounded like kids talking. And then there was occasionally this deeper voice. And I was just baffled, like, what in the heck? I thought for sure still it was my friends, because I knew that there was only one road in there. We were several miles in, and there was no other way for anybody to get in there other than hiking from, miles and miles and miles away. So as I got closer, I whistled, and just to get their attention. Well, they whistled back, and then it went silent. And I was only at this time only about 50, 75 yards away, but it was so thick I couldn't see. So I decided I was going to go over there and see who it was. If it was somebody, another hiker or something like that, then I would ask them how the heck they got all the way in there. Well, as I proceeded closer to them, I got to where I thought they should have been, and there was nobody there. So I whistled again, and they whistled back. But this time they were like down to, basically it would be to the south of me. And then they started talking again. And I was like, that's weird. I know they were standing right here. They had to have been. So I turn and I start walking back down towards them. I get to where I think they should be, and they're not there. And so I whistle again. No response. So I was like, okay, those two yard birds are messing with me. They're screwing with me. And I continued on scouting throughout the morning, and I finally got back to the truck and met up with those two, and I was like, yeah, very funny, you ding dongs, you guys were screwing with, and they were looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, wasn't that you guys that was being idiots back in there? And they're like, no, we don't know nothing about it. So it kind of blew that off, and I was like, well, it had to have been somebody talking, some other hikers or something like that. So we went out. So this was that was probably 2 weeks before season opened. So that would have been in late September, I'm guessing. I can't remember what the dates the deer season opened back then. So deer season rolls around. We decide we're going to hunt that. So we show up. We drive down that same road. We're the only rig down there. We do the same exact plan, except back in this wilderness area, there's a big, I'd say probably 2-3 miles back in there, there was a big rock bluff, and it was noticeable. You can see it from, if you were on your way in, you could look way out and see it, but you could see it on the map. We decided we're going to hunt the morning separate, split up, do the same thing we did, and we're going to meet at that rock cliff, late morning, and then we'll figure out if we want to go any farther. So I take my same path I did 2 weeks prior to that, and I get probably half a mile in there, and I jump a giant buck. This thing was huge, and it stopped perfect for me, and I ended up shooting it. It was actually the biggest buck to this date I've ever shot. So I walk up to it. I'm just pumped as all get out, hooting and hollering, making all kinds of noise. And so I start gutting it. I get it all gutted up, and I think, okay, well, they heard my shot. My two buddies heard my shot. They should be, I would have thought they would have already been there by the time I got it gutted. And I got it all done. And I was like, well, they hadn't showed up. So I was like, well, they might not have heard me. They might be chasing deer as well. So I told myself, I was like, I'm going to walk to that rock and I'll meet them there, and then they can help me pack it out. So I start walking. I get the deer all gutted, cleaned out. I rolled it over to where its belly was down, so the blood ran out. And I start walking towards that rock, and I get probably 300-400 yards away from my deer towards that rock. And I hear somebody talking back to where my deer was. And I was like, oh, sweet. My two buddies, they're talking. They're there. They're there at the deer. They found it. So I turn around and I start hauling butt back to my deer. I'm all pumped, excited to, share what I'd got with those guys. Well, I get back down to where my deer was, and my deer was gone. And even the guts were gone. The only thing that was left was just the blood that had drained out of the cavity. At that point, I was ticked. And that talking sounded exactly like what I'd heard 2 weeks prior to that. So I was starting to look around like somebody freaking stole my deer. So I start looking around and I find these footprints, but it was only one single footprint. And I don't know if you've ever been in the high desert over there. The ground over there is kind of like, it's almost like a baby powder. You step in it, you sink about ankle deep, pick your foot up, it just kind of folds back in on itself. So I just assumed that somebody had taken my deer. So I start tracking it, and I cannot catch up with this thing. And it's pretty clear. The footprints were pretty clear, and it was going deeper into the wilderness area, not towards the road. So I tracked it for a while, and then I was starting to think, I was like, man, I don't know, this might be pretty stupid, me doing this by myself. But I mean, it was the biggest buck of my life at the time, and I was going to shoot who took this deer. So I tracked it for a while, and I finally said, you know what, I'm going to meet my buddies at the rock. We're going to try to track this guy down, and we're going to get him. So I met my buddies at the rock, told them what had happened, and they were like, yeah, we heard you shoot, but we didn't know exactly where it was. It was just one shot. So we go back down to where it was, and we start from the beginning. They seen the blood, they knew, and I showed them the track. We start tracking it, and we tracked this thing for probably a mile, mile and a half. And then all of a sudden, there was nothing. Well, at the time, what didn't dawn on me was it was just a track. This buck was huge. I mean, this thing, it would have taken all three of us. We would have to cut it up and pack it out of there. There was no drag in it. I mean, this thing was, body wise, it was huge. But it didn't dawn on me at the time that there was just footprints, no drag marks. So I was ticked off at the world. There was nothing I could do. We tracked as far as we could, and then we lost the tracks. Couldn't figure out what direction it went. But it did go farther out into the wilderness area. So we ended up giving up on it, and we went back and we hunted the rest of that season there. Never did see anything else. Never got any shots at anything. So deer season ends. This would have been probably late October. This was after elk season. So probably late October, early November, we decide we're going to go on a grouse hunt. So we loaded up our shotguns, and this time there was four of us, me and three other buddies. We decided we're going to go to that same area and camp there. There was a lot of grouse down that road, that one road that went 2 miles back into that wilderness area. So we decided we were going to camp there and grouse hunt in that same area. So we loaded up all of our camping gear. We go up there, we set camp up, and this was on a Friday, I believe. So we set camp up, and we get everything all set up, and it was towards the evening when, by the time we got there, we get a big old bonfire going in the middle of that cul-de-sac area at the end of that road. And we're sitting there just BSing, having a good time, just enjoying being out there. And it got to be dark. And around 10 o'clock, I believe, we all decided we were going to go to bed. And we set up two tents. Each tent was like a little two-man tent. And so there was two of us in one and two of us in the other. So we go to bed, and we're laying there, and I'm about ready to go to sleep. And all of a sudden, we hear this big, like, log snap right behind the tents. And at that point, I'm thinking, oh, it's an elk or a deer. Well, next thing I know, a bigger log snapped, and it was getting closer to the tent. And so I nudged my buddy next to me, and I was like, do you hear that? And he's like, yeah, I hear that. I go, you think it's an elk or something? Because it sounded big. He's like, I don't know. It sounds pretty dang big to me. I don't know what the heck that is. And it starts getting closer and closer. And these footfalls were, I mean, you could tell it was giant. This thing was, you could almost feel it in the ground. Of course, over there back in that volcanic area, it's kind of weird that the acoustics are different. You can hear footfall from a ways away. You know, when the deer are running, you can hear them really well. Well, this thing keeps getting closer and closer. And as it's getting closer, we could tell that it was bipedal. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't an elk. And I yelled at my buddies in the tent next to us. I go, hey, do you hear that? And they're like, yeah, what is that? And we're like, I don't know, but it is freaking huge, whatever it is. And it gets to where I'm guessing it's probably 50 yards behind the tents. And we start playing the the card where, hey, we got guns. We're going to shoot you if you keep coming, making all kinds of noise. And it just proceeded to take each step. It would take it, it would get closer and closer and closer. And all of our shotguns, all of our weapons are in the vehicles. We didn't have anything in the tents as far as weapons go. So we're all freaking out because whatever this is not backing away, with our human voices yelling at it and telling them that we have guns. And all we were in is these little 2-man tents that anything could easily get through. So we all are sitting there talking, trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do and who was going to be the first one out of the tent to get to the rig to get a gun. So it gets to be where we're thinking it's got to be only like 10 feet behind the tent. And I couldn't take it. I was freaking out. I was scared to death because it sounded like a dinosaur coming at us. So we unzip the tent and I go running, and then as I go running out the tent, I notice that my other two buddies in the other tent, they're running to their rigs. And we get to the rigs and we open the door, we grab the shotguns out, and we're sitting there turning and looking in the direction behind the tents, and with the fire is still going. So I don't know if you've ever seen where when you got a fire going in a really thick spot, it lights up everything. You can just see the surface part of the trees. The light doesn't really penetrate back into the trees hardly at all. So we're sitting there yelling at it, saying, "We're going to shoot you. We're going to shoot you. We got guns. We got lots of ammo," trying to scare whatever this thing is. And I don't know if you've ever, well, I'm sure you have, watched Jurassic Park, where that Tyrannosaurus Rex, when all the guys are like looking at the trees, and that thing's like, just every step is louder and louder, and the trees are moving. Well, that's what it sounded like. It just kept getting closer and closer. It's like, man, that thing should be like, whatever it is, should be coming out of those trees at any second. And finally, we had had enough. And I think I was the first one, but I just started pumping shotgun shells into shooting the gun into the trees at that noise. And it was like a split second later, all three other buddies started shooting, and we were just like basically logging these jack pines that were all around us in the direction that sound was. Well, we stopped and we said, "We're not fooling around. We're just going to keep shooting." And it still continued to walk and stay just out of the light in those trees. And it was walking all the way around this circular cul-de-sac area around us. We were standing by the fire by our trucks. And I bet you, I don't, to this day, I don't know how many shotgun shells we went through, but I know that there was we had empty boxes of shotgun shells all over the place out there. We were just unloading, and this thing just continued to harass us. It stayed just inside the trees all the way around. So we're like, this is not human. This is not an animal. If it was an animal, it would have ran. If it would have been a human, it would have came out and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, it's just me. We're playing a prank on you." And so we decided let's get out of here. So we turned on the rigs, and I told one of my buddies that was driving, I said, "Swing your truck around and shine your headlights. See if we can look out into the trees a little bit and see if we can see what this is." And so he was just kind of slowly going in reverse in a circle, shining his headlights around this circular area. We didn't see anything at all. Well, just as we were coming around in full circle and starting to head out the direction the way we had to get out of there, It was both of us at the same time, both rigs. We swung around and the headlights were kind of pointing down the road, heading out of there. And there it was, standing there to the left side next to a tree. And all I remember was at that point, it was just like panic mode, because what we were looking at was not real. I mean, it's not supposed to be real. It was just insane just to sit there and be staring at it directly in the face. And it was only like 25, 30 yards from us. And we had to drive by it to get out of there. And we both of my buddies gassed it, and we went flying out of that road. And as we were going by, I was looking at it in the eyes as we went by, and I still can't get that out of my head just looking at it. And anyways, we go out of that road and we hit the pavement, and we kind of stopped, and we're like, do you think we're far enough away from this thing? Do you think it followed us? What do we do? And we'd left everything. We left our tents, our coolers full of food, our chairs, everything, our sleeping bags. And so that Three Creeks campground was not too far up the road, up the pavement from there. So we decided, let's get to the campground. Hopefully there's somebody camping there, a camp host or something. So we go flying up to the campground, and we get to the gate. Well, there's a gate, and it was closed for the season. So we decide we're just going to sleep right there in the rigs, and we'll figure out what to do in the morning. Well, needless to say, we did not sleep at all. None of us slept. We sat there and talked about, which is kind of weird, because when you listen to these podcasts, you hear about all these people that have this happen, and they say they never talk about it, or anything. We talked about it nonstop. So we sat there all night. Finally, daylight comes, and we decide we're going to go in there fully loaded, and get all of our stuff and get the heck out of there. So we drive in there. We get back to where the camp was, and one of the tents, our tent, was collapsed. Like it was down. The other tent was kind of partially collapsed. It was really loose. And we got to looking, and there was a bunch of sticks and stuff laying around the tent at both of them. And so we're like jumping out. We're grabbing we're trying to break everything down. We're not even really rolling anything up. We're just kind of throwing stuff in the back, and we get everything loaded up. And it was at that point we started kind of feeling a little more at ease, because it was daylight and we could see what was going on. And so I told the guys, let's look right where that thing was standing and see what we see. And so we walked over there to the tree, and there was clearly a perfect footprint right next to this tree. And we started looking around, and you could see its footprints all the way around camp. And it basically, we kind of tracked it, and it looked like it just wore a trail down around this area just inside the trees. But I distinctly remember when we were driving by it, there was a little jack pine that was next to it, and it came up to its chest. And so obviously its shoulders and head was above this jack pine. Well, when we were standing there, that jack pine was at the top of my head, and at that time I was probably like 5'10", I'm guessing, something like that. So we're talking, we're just like, do we tell somebody about this? What should we do? And at that point, I decided I was going to be the one. I was going to go tell somebody. So we got all of our stuff loaded, and we headed out of there. We drove all the way into Sisters, and we went to the Forest Service. There's a forest a ranger station there. And we sat out in the parking lot debating on if we should tell anybody and who was actually going to tell. And I was like, oh, I'll do it. I don't care. This, something's got to be done about this. So I walk in there and I looked at the guy that was there at the counter, and I was like, I know I'm just a teenager. You're probably not going to believe me or anything, and I told him the story. And he looked at me with a straight face, and he's like, oh yeah. He goes, we get reports like this all the time. And I was like, really? And he's like, oh yeah. He goes, it happens all the time around here. And I was like, well, there's a clear footprint up there. If you want to do whatever, if you want to take pictures, and he was like, oh no. He goes, we got plenty of those. We got plenty of castings of from other people. We don't need it. And I was like, in my head, I was thinking, what the heck? These things aren't real, but yet here's somebody telling me that they are real. And I was just baffled by that. I couldn't quite fathom what was going on and what had just happened to us. So we go to school the next week, and we start telling everybody. And I mean, we got ridiculed, we got laughed at, we're a bunch of idiots, and you guys, you know the story, and so we just quit talking about it. We still to this day talk about it whenever we see each other. Actually, only one of the friends that was with me, I actually keep in contact with, and he remembers it like it was yesterday as well. But that was my first encounter. Any questions?
That is absolutely intense. Have you ever heard anything else that sounds like that talking that you heard that day?
Well, the crazy thing is throughout all my years of hunting up until that point and beyond, I have heard it like a couple other times, but like I said, back then there was no internet. I hardly ever even watched TV. The only thing I ever seen of Bigfoot was some guy debunked the Patty Gimlin film, and it was on the news, and it was a hoax. And that was what I knew of Bigfoot at the time. And I didn't know about any of this other stuff that supposedly Bigfoots do. It wasn't until Finding Bigfoot came on is when I started like tree knocks. I was like, well, I hear those all the time. All these whoops and whistles, and I mean, I would always hear that stuff out in the woods. Somebody like whistling at me, trying to get my attention, and I look, and I never could see anybody. But what really freaked me out was when that came on, and then that what's the name of the talk, Sierra Sounds.
Yeah. Okay.
When they first did that, I about crapped my drawers, because that was basically, it wasn't exact, but it was close enough to where it freaked me out. I was like, holy crap. I was actually chasing this thing, because I thought it was people, and or my buddies.
Right.
At the time, I was just like, whoa.
So you have heard the Sierra Sounds, and you're saying what you heard that day was very similar to the Sierra Sounds.
Yes.
Wow.
So, like I said, there was two of them that sounded like almost like kids, like younger people. And then there was one that would only talk ever so often, but it was super deep. But it was close enough to those Sierra Sounds where I could tell you that that's exactly what it was, just that language that I was hearing.
When you saw the one in the headlights and you had to drive by it to get out, Who in the vehicle was the closest to the Bigfoot when you guys drove by?
The driver. It was on the left side as we were like leaving.
Gotcha. Were you able to see any details of the face at all, or what did it look like specifically when you had the headlights on it?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I can't get it out of my head. I know exactly what it looked like. I know this is going to sound stupid just because after watching all these podcasts and these documentaries and things like that, the closest one I could tell you what it looked like was, I don't know if that Todd Standing that nobody seems to believe or like. Uh, that one that's like peeking through this little window that I can't remember, he calls it by some name. It's black, but it looked just like an ancient human is what it looked like. It looked like a human.
So this is really interesting because this now makes the second time on the show that someone uses that specific reference. The first time being an individual who is looking for gold south of Oak Ridge, so not too far away in the grand scheme of things. It's a very, very interesting detail for you to bring up.
Oh, really? Yeah, when I watched that Todd Standing documentary and I seen that, I mean, it's almost like an identical twin that I'm looking at. And my second encounter actually looks just like the other one that he shows, not the brown one that's like super clear, but it's like I hate to say this, and I'm not being mean, but it's the color of like an orangutan, but it has the face like a Down syndrome person has. And I'm not being mean about that or anything. That's what it looked like. I think he calls that one.
Yeah.
I think he calls that one Jane or something, like a female.
Yeah, that's also really interesting because you're not the only one that has used that description in the field. It's come up a few times, and it's very interesting. Yeah, it's a detail that keeps coming up. So I think there could be something there.
Yeah, both of my encounters, like that one, they look different. Like I said, this one took on more of like an ancient human, like it's hard to explain. If you've seen that documentary, you'd know what I was talking about. But then the other one had a different look in the face. But just like we all do as humans.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have similar characteristics, but then very, very different features as well. That's a great way to put it. I mean, you hear all these Bigfoot encounters, and they're similar, yet they are very, very unique. Those are the questions I have so far. Lyle, feel free to continue if you'd like.
Just one more thing I'd add to that. So that, like I said, its head and shoulders were above that tree. So, it sounds so stereotypical, but I'm guessing it was between the 8 and 9 foot tall range. And there was nothing around that tree that he could have been standing on. I say he, I don't know if it was a he or not, but there's nothing on that was around there that he could have been standing on or, elevated himself. So I just wanted to add that as far as like height and stuff.
I did think of another question. During that time when you actually had the Bigfoot in the headlights, did anyone in any of the cars start to have any weird, out of the ordinary physical reaction to seeing what they saw?
You know, thinking just, I don't think they did. No, if they did, it wasn't told to me about it.
Sure.
And out of all the times all this has happened to me, I personally have never like felt any different. I'm one of those ones that uh, I seem to be opposite of what everybody else is. Like, people don't talk about it. Which we did. We talked. We still to this day talk about it. Like we couldn't shut up about it. And you hear all these other people that were with friends or something like that, and they never say a word about it. I do believe that a lot of the stuff that people are feeling is the amount of fear and adrenaline that is going through your body. I think a lot of that feeling that people think is infrasound or whatever is just coming down off of that adrenaline that they're producing at the time. It's such a shock to your system because you're witnessing something that you've been told all your life that doesn't even exist. And it's facing you and you're facing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there. And just imagine if you had had that sighting not being in a vehicle, not having that almost false sense of security. I mean, it wouldn't take much for it to take a vehicle apart. And, I mean, that's not going to really save you, I think. But
yeah, no. And that's the way I look at it nowadays is back when that happened, it took me forever to get to where I would really felt comfortable even going out by myself. But I've gotten to the point now where if this thing was out to kill you or hurt you, it would have done that to me a long time ago. The amount of time I spent out in the woods and all the experiences that I've had, I'd have been gone a long time ago. And I hear, people talking about, well, if you shoot at one, you're in big trouble. Well, we shot at one numerous times, but I'm guessing 30 plus rounds, and we're still here. It never did anything as far as like, wasn't aggressive. Um, it was almost like it was just curious, and it was just wanted to watch us.
It's a very lucky situation. I've taken a report from an individual where one of his friends opened fire in the Packwood, Washington area, and shot it in the face. And then later on, this individual was thrown in the woods about 10 feet by something they couldn't see. And I mean, it doesn't. You can guess what that would have been. You're one of the lucky, unique situations to be able to do something like that and not have something happen to you. So it's very unique to hear.
Okay, well, I'll go on to my second encounter.
Sure.
This one I don't talk about too much because I was by myself. The only reason like my wife and kids, they all have heard that story a gazillion times because they all have me tell their friends and their, oh, Dad, tell them your Bigfoot story. Well, this one I keep quiet about, and I don't think I've ever told anybody this one, just because I was by myself, and it's one of those things that I pretty much just kept to myself because I had the experience of the first one telling people about it, and I had 3 other buddies with me with that one. This one being by myself, I could only imagine the kind of crap I would get from telling this story, but I'm going to tell it anyways. So like everybody already knows, I live out here in Malala, and there is a spot up a road. It's called Wilhoit Road. And there was a spot that I used to love to hunt up there. It always kind of gave me the creepy feeling. It's super big, tall, old growth uh, fir trees. Um, I don't know why it does, but every time I go in there, I just kind of felt creepy. But I love to hunt it because there was lots of elk and lots of deer in there all the time. Well, I went up there one day by myself. It was deer season, and I was sneaking up through the old growth fir. And in the underneath this old growth fir, it's just a sea of ferns, and the ferns are probably 3 foot tall. And I was walking uphill, and as I was walking uphill, I was looking at the ground, looking for sign, seeing if the deer had been moving through there, if the elk had been moving through there, and this little bowl shaped area. It's probably, I'd say, 100 by 100 yards, and I could see the whole face of the hillside all the way around me. Well, as I'm walking through the ferns, I'm looking down at the ground, and I just start to pick my head up, and in the corner of my eye, I catch movement. And as I start to turn my head and look, I thought what I saw was a bear. And it was by this big fir tree. And if you ever seen a bear coming down out of a tree, when it just right when it touches the ground, its rear legs are on the ground and its front legs are up above its head, still hanging onto the tree. Well, that's the position it was in when I first seen it. And right when my eyes looked at it, that was my first thought, was bear. And I whipped my rifle off, and I had a bear tag. I've always had a bear. I always have a bear tag, and the season runs during deer season. And so I ripped my rifle off, and as I'm ripping my rifle off and swinging to shoot this bear, it comes down off of the tree, and as it's coming off the tree is when it looks at me, and I could see that it had hands and it had a face, and it went from bear to holy, you know what? It's Bigfoot, and this thing is only 50 yards from me, and it went down to onto all fours, and it went behind this tall ferns. And I had my gun up, and in my mind, I'm going, do I shoot it? Do I shoot it? What do I do? And I'm like, okay, this thing's going to come out somewhere. I'll be able to see it because I could see the whole hillside, and there was no place for it to go other than on this hillside. It had to leave. Well, the ferns moved just for a split second when it went behind the ferns, and I'm sitting there. My eyes are just like scanning, like, where is this thing? And I'm looking for it, and I never see anything come out. And so I start slowly creeping up to my left, and I'm going to try to get above it where I can look down onto it. And as I'm sneaking around, my eyes are like all over the place, just seeing if this thing's going to escape anywhere. And I don't see anything. And I make it all the way around 360 degrees, all the way around where this thing went behind these ferns, and I never saw anything. And so I finally got the courage up, and I started sneaking up to where it actually was, and there was nothing there. It just like vanished. But it was so crystal clear when I seen it, and when it came down, it went to all fours, and it went behind those ferns. I mean, I can still to this day see it in my head, and I don't know what happened. Where did it go? I don't know where it went. To this day, I couldn't tell you. And as big as it was, you would have seen the ferns move. You would have seen it come out on the hillside. I had a wide open hillside that it had, the only other way would have been right past me, and it never came past me. Um, and that's why I don't ever talk about it, because it sounds so far fetched that I think everybody's like got that mindset like, oh yeah, what were you smoking? What were you drinking? It's just so I just never talk about it. But that was my second sighting, and that's the one that it was a reddish color. It looked kind of like a orangutan color, the hair, but the face looked like that Todd Standings Jane that he calls her. I think it had that kind of Down syndrome look to its face. That's my second sighting.
What was the sound like in the woods that day?
Well, it was super like misty, kind of like a fog misty. You could just hear like raindrops. Just it's just like dew. We get this dew over here that will sit on the leaves, and then it'll build up, and then it drips. And that was the only. It was dead quiet. Other than that,
From what you saw, the point when you had seen, it comes off the tree, it has
hmm
hands, it has a face. Do you remember any details that stick out in your mind that made you think, okay, this is not a bear? What I'm seeing in the face right now is totally different.
I was able to lock my eyes on it. Just for the other thing I forgot to mention was, as my eyes were coming up and actually visually seeing this thing, it there was like a tree knock, and it sounded like it came from that thing, that Bigfoot. But there was nothing in its hand as far as like a stick or anything. So, which kind of leads me to think that these tree knocks that people talk about, I think they're doing it with their mouth or something. Because it was so loud, that knock, when it happened, it had to have been that one right there. It had to have been that uh, animal there that made the noise. It was so loud, it was just like right there when it happened. But as I heard that is when I was seeing it, but nothing fell out of its hands. Like it would have hit something with a stick. If it would have had a stick, I would have thought that I would see like a stick, flying out of its hands or falling out of its hands. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I had a buddy back in high school that could do this thing with his tongue. He'd suck his tongue up against the roof of his mouth, and he'd just, and it would just, I mean, he would actually almost make you deaf. It just blow your eardrums out. And it's kind of what I'm leaning towards on this knocking thing after seeing that.
I agree with you. There's more than a few people in the community that are throwing around theories like, what you just said, or sometimes having its hands in front of its face so it can make like some kind of, clap its hands, or maybe even, I think there's some individuals out there that think there might be some kind of air sac that it can, inflate in its throat. I haven't heard that one a lot, but what you said, I've heard that more than a few times. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it was so loud and clear when it happened, and it was obvious that Bigfoot made that sound, but I did not see anything in its hand, which leads me to believe that it was doing it somehow through its mouth or whatever. I don't know how that, I wouldn't even that's all speculation. I'm just guessing, but it was I seen it enough to know that it wasn't hitting the tree with a stick,
Hmm.
but it made that sound like it hit the tree with a stick.
Absolutely. What approximate year was this again?
Uh, I'm going to say the early 2000s.
Okay.
Um, I couldn't tell you what it was before I had hounds. So I'm going to say like 2004, 2005.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out real quick for listeners that Lyle is not a Bigfoot researcher. He is a lifelong hunter. And these, he does listen to some Bigfoot media, but he's not a researcher. He is primarily a hunter.
Yeah, no, I've never, until Finding Bigfoot came out, I I didn't even know that there was even a possibility that Bigfoot made tree knocks or whoops or whistles or any of that stuff. I had through rocks. I mean, even the chatter, the talking, I knew nothing about it. And nor did I care to even learn that. But until that happened, and I started putting all these pieces together of stuff that had happened to me over the years, I was just like, holy crap, I cannot believe all this stuff has been happening, and I had no clue.
It is always interesting in conversations like this, how there's a point when the individual starts to put everything together. But it's been a fascinating conversation so far, Lyle. Did you have any other things happen after that?
Those are the only two actual physical sightings I've had, but I've had other crazy things happen to me. I got into hound hunting several years ago, and up in this same area, this is up the Malala corridor. We used to do a lot of bobcat hunting, and I used to hunt with several buddies that had hounds, and these hounds were bear dogs, they were cat dogs. These dogs had zero fear of anything. These dogs would, you'd catch a bear on the ground, they'd catch a bear on the ground and be right in that bear's face, just baying it up, going crazy. Well, one night we were up hound hunting and the dogs struck and they were going crazy. And we turned them out and they went running up on the hill, up on this bluff. And all of a sudden you hear all this yipping and yiping and like something was hurting them. And here they come running back down the hill, tails between their legs, and they bailed back in the truck. It was like we could not get them back out of the truck. And they actually refused to come back out of that box all night long. They wouldn't even say a peep, which is completely like, it just doesn't happen. Well, a buddy of mine, as a little spoof, they went and got, I think it was a gorilla costume, and they were doing this little video, and they had their hounds on their truck, and they had this guy that was dressed up in a gorilla suit run out in front of them, and they were videoing it, and the dogs struck, and I'm assuming they thought it was a bear that ran across the road. And when they turned those dogs loose, they tore off after it. And as soon as they got close enough where he had stepped back out on the road and they could see that it was like an upright gorilla, those dogs like hit the brakes, started yipping, wheeled around, and did that exact same thing back to the truck. And they were like whimpering. It was like they had seen it before. And it like they knew exactly what it was, and they did not want anything to do with it, which is just totally crazy to me because these dogs, they're just insane. I mean, they're fearless, which I thought was pretty interesting seeing that. Another Another thing that had happened to us a couple of years ago, my wife and I, we went up deer. She went up deer hunting with me, and we were driving down the road up by Table Rock Wilderness area, and it was a weekday, and we were the only ones up there. There was a slight skip of snow on the road, and we were putting up this old logging road. Nobody had been on it. We were the first truck on it, and all of a sudden, I catch something coming towards my windshield. I thought it was a bird, and I'm like, "Oh crap!" And before I could say crap, it had hit my window, and it was an actual rock. It had hit my windshield, dead centered it, and it slid down my windshield onto the plate where your wipers are. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "Is that what I think that was?" And I was like, "I think so. I mean, that was a rock." And she saw it coming too. And it was thrown. So it was thrown and it came off the hillside, which it's all trees. But you could not hit my windshield more dead center than that rock did. That was another crazy one that had happened to us. Another crazy experience we had was it was archery season, which is September, hotter than heck out. My father-in-law and we decided we were going to go. I'd found these elk in this swamp area up in this timber company that it used to be walk-in only. You couldn't drive in there. I had walked up in there and I'd found a pretty good sized herd of elk up in this swamp area. And it was so hot out that at that time of the year, it was getting down to, it was still like in the 80s at night. So we decided, well, let's walk up in there. This was Friday afternoon. Let's walk up in there. We'll get up in there just before daylight and we'll just sack out underneath the tree. We'll wake up and we'll be right there on them first thing in the morning. So my father-in-law, he's been in the woods his whole life as well. His father-in-law and all that, he actually was one of the guys that ran this same timber company. Well, not the same company, but the same land for many, many years. He'd been all over up in there. So we walk up in there and we get up in there and we find a perfect spot just to lay down and crash out for the night. And it got to be about 10 o'clock and we were getting eaten by the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes were just absolutely horrible. And all of a sudden, I don't know the exact time. I'm guessing it was around 11, maybe 12. All of a sudden, we hear this, I want to say scream, but it wasn't a scream. It was more like a roar. And the only thing I can describe it is like that Ohio howl. But it was so freaking loud. It was like insanely loud. And it was coming from that same swamp that I'd found those elk in. And my father-in-law was like, "That had to have been a bear, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, that wasn't a bear. I'd, hound hunted. I'd heard plenty of bears and cougars and all that stuff, knew exactly what they sounded like. But this thing it was insanely loud. Like it shook your guts type loudness. And it was still a ways off. That swamp we were still probably a quarter mile away from that swamp. And that's exactly where it sounded like. But it was so loud that it still reverberated in your chest. It was so loud.
You may have heard me talk about it before. I think I've heard something similar in the Willamette down by Oak Ridge. It just the way that affects you is nuts. Physically, it just.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and of course we had to spend the rest of the night. I took the only thing we had. It was archery season. Also, the only thing we had was bow and arrows, and so I think I took 2 arrows out, and I slept with one arrow in each hand sticking straight out from me, And I didn't even sleep. I just sat there all night, and I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't about ready to walk out of there because we were a couple miles in, and we didn't. I don't even think we had a headlight. I don't think we even brought a headlight. We went super light. Um, but we just laid there all night long waiting for it to get daylight. Uh, and actually, after it got daylight, I looked at him. I was like, "You ready to go hunt?" And he's like, "No, let's get out of here." He didn't want anything to do with going into that after hearing that.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and in that same area, oh, it was several years later they opened it up to a permit, and so you could drive in there. Well, I had went in there with a couple buddies. We were deer hunting, and I ran across this herd of bucks. There was probably 10 or 12 bucks in it, and we decided we were going to hunt this timbered ridge that kind of ran, and it was actually right behind that swamp that I was talking about. And we get to walking down that ridge, and my buddies are off to my left, and I was right on top of that ridge. And I'm walking down, and I get to this area, and there is crap everywhere. And this stuff was like this, when I say feces, crap, this stuff was like the size of a pop can. And it was literally like in piles everywhere. And as I got to looking around, I watched this documentary. I think it's is it the Bigfoot Project, or I can't remember. It's up on the peninsula where they find these nests.
Oh, the Olympic
And
Project.
yeah, there you
Yep,
go.
yep,
There
yep.
you go. And I found this nest, and it was woven with like fir boughs and stuff like that. But there was like literally, you could see mounds probably a foot and a half, 2 foot tall of animal crap, and it was spread out all over the place in there, and it was super thick. But there was a nest in there. Well, I got my buddies over there. I'd go, "Look at this. What was this?" And I still at that point didn't know anything about all this stuff. And they're like, "God, it has to be bear." I mean, and that's what I thought it was a bear. But watching that documentary, I'm pretty positive that that was a nest. And it was right on, like I said, it was right on top of a ridge behind that swamp, and there was zero roads. It was pretty hard to get to. And with all the other experiences that have been happening up there, I'm pretty positive that was a nest we stumbled on. Of course, I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't even think to take pictures or anything like that.
Of course, it's a hindsight's 2020 thing. Did you say this is also in the Table Rock Wilderness area or something, a completely different area?
Yeah, so Table Rock Wilderness is on, I think, the south side of the river. I was on the north side of the river.
Okay.
It's a little creek called Bower Creek. Weyerhaeuser's the timber company. Bower Creek, Bauer, I believe is, or maybe it's Baurer.
This also early 2000s, probably.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It dumps into Pine Creek. Uh, yeah, I believe it. I think it dumps into Pine Creek Canyon, which is where Pine Creek is, which is where, when you watch, I think it's Finding Bigfoot. That was the other thing that was kind of, if you follow that ridge down, it comes out there. There's a guy that talks about seeing a Bigfoot, and they're standing at that bridge, at Pine Creek Bridge. He doesn't say it's Pine Creek Bridge, but that's where it's at. Where he had an encounter while he was fishing right there.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was on that Finding Bigfoot. I think he said he's seen red glowing eyes. That's the other thing, is all this stuff that's happened to me, I've never, like, that I can remember. I never had smelt anything off. Never. You hear people talking about they smell this horrible smell. Um, I never found like, other than that one, the first experience I've had, I've never found like a definite footprint. Um, I've definitely ran into stuff that, it looked like it, but I couldn't tell you 100% if it was or not. Um, yeah, so that same spot, that Pine Creek Canyon where that guy was, just up the river from there, I was fishing, salmon fishing, and I parked my rig and walked down. It was probably 150 yards down to the river, and I had rocks thrown into the river while I was fishing, and never. I actually was yelling at him like, "Hey, a-hole, knock it off! I'm down here fishing." And never. I went walking back up thinking I'd see somebody parked by my rig, and there was nobody that I could find. So, all that stuff is stuff that I couldn't tell you 100% that it was Bigfoot or if it was somebody throwing rocks. A lot of this stuff I can't. A lot of this, the whistles that I've heard over the years, some of the tree knocks, it could have been, I've been in the woods where I've heard the trees creaking and it sounded like a wood knock. And I'm like, that must have been what I've been hearing all this time. But I mean, you never know. Seems like a lot of people are having these same experiences.
Oh yeah, especially over the years in this area. It's just, I mean, I've talked to multiple individuals that have had just wild stuff happen in this Molalla area. We were talking about this beforehand, and I think it might be good to mention it as well. This entire Molalla River corridor area has been burned recently, correct?
Oh yeah, that's why I don't really mind sharing where this stuff is at, because it's basically moonscape now from the fires we had in 2020. There's really nothing left of it up here. It was bad. It's bad. It's pretty much gone now.
Yeah. So that to say, guys, you're not going to be able to drive up there and find the next Olympic project Bigfoot nest site, probably, because it's all been burned. So just a heads up on that, guys. Yeah. Did you have any other things you were wanting to share as well, Lyle?
There is one other. So
okay.
I'd sent you an email back a couple years or several years ago. My kids were still young. We went to Colton High School. It was for I want to say it was a wrestling tournament or something. Well, when I walked in there, the front foyer, the entrance area, there was it was actually a pretty big Bigfoot display there. And at the time, I didn't really think much of it, but I used to hunt up this road. It's called Hillock Burn Road. It's up out of Colton and Elwood. And I was driving up Hillock Burn one year. It was archery season, and I ran into this old guy that was living in a camp trailer, and he was the night watchman / security guy for the loggers that were up there. He kind of watched the equipment and the site for him. And I kind of befriended him because he obviously lived up there, and I was trying to get information. I was like, "Hey, you seen the elk out here?" And he always, the first couple times I talked to him, I'd ask him and say, "Hey, you seen the elk or deer?" And he's like, "No, but I've seen Bigfoot." And he was one of those old guys that kind of like, the way he talked and stuff, you were like, okay, is this guy, I think he's kind of out there type. And I think it was like the third or fourth time I'd stopped and talked to him. He's like, let me show you. These suckers were in here, and he took me down this little tiny trail. It used to be a road that's all grown up now. And he was showing me all these trees that were snapped over. The tops were snapped over, and they were all twisted. And just like I said, back at that time, I didn't know that that's what Bigfoot was associated, that type of stuff was associated with Bigfoot. And when Finding Bigfoot came out, I started kind of looking into all these documentaries. Well, I found this old documentary, and I was trying to find it so I could tell you, but I wasn't able to find it. It starts out with this guy playing drums.
Playing drums. Yes, I was like, this is the Henry Franzoni one. I knew it the whole time you were talking. I was like, that's the guy from the Henry Franzoni documentary. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that guy was on there.
It's
and I
the
was
same
like,
dude.
Are you freaking kidding?
I knew it.
Same guy.
Oh man.
Same freaking guy.
I just knew it when you were describing him.
And
oh wow.
Road. So that whole documentary was off of Hillock Burn, that same road.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, which kind of blew me away. I was like, what in the heck is going on? Why do I, and like you'd said, I'm not a researcher. Me and my family go out and we do it. We've had experiences, which I'll probably have to save for another time, but we go out and just kind of do it for fun now, but when there's nothing else to do. Okay. But yeah, all this stuff is so crazy.
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit excited, so I'm gonna try not to interrupt. But so is this Hillock Burn Spring?
It's not. I don't think it's just Hillock Burn Road, I believe.
Okay, so it's not like off of Forest Road 46.
It very well could be. So if you go due north out of Colton,
okay,
there'll be, I think I want to say 5 miles out of Colton towards Estacada.
Yep.
It's Hillock Burn Road. And you take a right on that and you stay on that. And that takes you back up, by Goat Mountain.
Oh, yep.
Green Mountain. And that country up in there.
Holy mackerel. So, okay, this is wild because, as I said, I think this might have been off air, but I'm reading the Oregon Bigfoot Highway book again, which is Forest Road 46. And then it goes down to 224.
Road numbers and names.
But it's pretty much like the craziest Bigfoot area in that part of the Pacific Northwest. And I'm going to have to see. Okay, here it is. 46 and then Route 224. So you take 46 through Ripplebrook, and then eventually it dumps you out at Detroit Lake. But that's crazy. So to know that's my favorite Bigfoot documentary, dude, is Henry Franzoni. I got to talk to him a few times. He was a great guy. He's no longer with us, but to know that I always wanted to know where that area was. And for you just to drop oh my goodness, you are incredible, my friend. I always wanted to talk to that dude in the documentary, but it's like, he's long gone. He's got to be long gone.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was years ago. Super nice guy. Kind of, like I said, kind of out there. And when I seen that, I just about fell out of my chair.
Because you know,
same guy is on.
Yeah, he's seen stuff. The type of guy he is. He was having stuff happen all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was so matter of fact. Like he didn't even I don't know type attitude. I mean, it was like, this is what's happening. This is what they're doing. It was like he knew exactly what was going on and who they were and what they were all about.
Incredible. My goodness. I will also say, listeners, all these areas, a lot of these areas that are being talked about are hard to get to. And it's not just a thing where it's like, I'm going to go out there and do whatever. You need to be prepared for survival situations in some of these situations. So just be careful. I would recommend getting the Oregon Bigfoot Highway. It talks about it. It's a great book.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely look into that.
Oh yeah, you would love it, man.
I know we're running out. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, and maybe I'll maybe plan another one where I can talk about all my family's experiences and everything else.
Man,
that
we got the
happened.
family stuff too. Yeah. Can I ask you one more question while I got you? Just in case. And this is going to be a left curveball, whatever the analogy is. Do you know of any Bigfoot activity that's happened over the years down by Subtle Lake? Are you familiar with that area?
Oh yeah. I used to hunt that all the time. I've had a few not cut and dried experiences, but things like I've been talking about happen there. I have several friends that have told me stories about things that have happened out there. I'd have to get with those guys and ask them if it's okay to talk to them.
I respect that. Yeah, absolutely. You always want to check that. Yep.
Just, all these buddies I talk about that was with me, I didn't ask them. And with the amount of crap you get from talking about this stuff, I hate to start dropping names and everything without anybody's permission.
And to tell you the truth, I usually end up editing the names out more recently, because it's like, I mean, if it's secondhand stuff, you never know, right? And especially if they have a weird name.
Yeah.
You can track those down. So
like my name, with my name, I mean, it's like everybody's going to know exactly who's talking here. It's not like a Brian where there's a gazillion Brians, but there's not too many Lyles out there.
Lyle, this has been we got to have if you're up for it, we got to have another conversation. I've got a whole list of we could definitely talk again if you're up for it. I'd love to talk to you about your family's experiences.
Oh, and, like I said, there's a lot more.
Okay. Yeah, we got to have you back on. I appreciate you spending some time on your Saturday talking about some of my favorite areas in this part of Oregon. It's been very, very eye-opening. That I haven't heard much from the Three Creeks area, so that's pretty cool. But we will be in touch, Lyle, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jeremiah.
You got it. Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKenzie Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.